Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to be upgrading the Outlaw Posse starter deck on Arena. We're going to be doing it with no rares, and if you want to upgrade these, you need to go to your starter decks, you need to select this, and you need to clone it down here because you can't edit these. And this is going to add a copy to your decks. Look, I've been upgrading these. I have 4 of them. You won't have 4 of them. I have 4 of them. So we're going to be upgrading this with no rares. The first thing you need to do, if you're on this windowed mode, is click right here on this bar, or if you're on this windowed mode, you need to click on this one and switch it over to standard because of course it defaults to alchemy. So this is a tribal outlaw deck. I can't show you that because wouldn't it be cool if you could type outlaw and it would actually show you the outlaws, but you can't. But it's outlaws. What if I just type outlaw? Well, there's some. And there's crime. Outlaws and crime. That's what we're doing. That's what we have. There's lots of bad stuff. Lots of low quality removal. Some low quality kind of clunky creatures. We're missing some very, very powerful outlaws in this archetype. So let's just fix that with no rares. We're not going to be spending any rare wild cards on this deck. So we can start by adding a rare to the deck because we can take the rares from the other decks. This is an outlaw. It is rare and we get it for free, and I believe this is in the Golgari food deck. So it's a warlock, that's an outlaw. It makes a food token. We don't really care about that in this deck, but it also, when it enters, something gets -X, where X is the amount of life we gained. So the idea is like on turn 5, we crack the food, gain 3, then pay 3 for this. It's a 3/2 that enters and gives something -3. We're going to have other ways to gain life. We don't have them to start with, do we? No, we're adding all of them. The point is, it's better than this, which is an outlaw, but it's just a 3-mana 3/2 that when it enters, it makes a treasure. We have some expensive stuff we're going to be cutting. This isn't always expensive, by the way. It has affinity. A lot of this is getting cut out. So, like, we don't need the treasure. It's not that big of a deal. And, I mean, this is just awesome. So, we'll take one of these out. We'll add one of our Gumdrop Poisoners because it is technically an outlaw, so that's cool. Next, this card is okay. 1 mana, 1/1. When it dies, we make a mercenary that taps to give something +1/+0. It's alright. It's okay. But I really like this card a lot. 1 mana, 1/1. When it dies, we scry and we make a treasure. We're actually going to have some sacrifice outlets. And it's also just so nice to play on turn 1. Ramps us into 3 drops. The scrying's nice, and it's a great chump blocker against aggro. And this is just okay. Don't love it. Don't hate it. It's just fine. So going to take 2 of these out. Going to add 2 more of these in. Basically most outlaw decks will play 4 copies of this because it's pretty good. Next, Vault Plunderer. This is it's a card. It's a card that exists. 3 mana, 3/1. You can make target player draw 1 and lose 1. So you can target your opponent to trigger crime, but giving them a card is crazy. Or you can target yourself, but then it's just kind of mid. This, on the other hand, is such a good card in these outlaw decks. First off, it's a 2 mana 3/2. So that's awesome. Then, whenever an outlaw enters, it deals 1 damage to, very important here, target opponent. That's a crime. So 2 mana 3/2, that not only deals a damage whenever we play an outlaw, but also triggers crime every time, is awesome in this archetype. Not to mention, we have multiple ways to get these mercenary tokens in, right? So if we played this, for example, it's a 4 mana 2/4, it makes 2 mercenaries, that's going to trigger Vile Smasher 3 times. So, yeah, this is just a must play in this deck. And this is, it's a card. But, I mean, I'd love to play 4 of these. It is legendary, do note. But it might be worth playing 4 anyway because, it's just pretty good. So, we have our attempt to trigger crime every turn. 2 mana, 1/3, reaches a nice bonus, I guess. It costs 1 and tap it to deal 1 damage to the opponent. I mean, it's a very cheap way to trigger crime every turn, but I mean, this is going to be better. We're going to trigger crime way more consistently with this. But there's not a lot of payoffs for committing crimes if I do this again. This is all of our payoffs for crimes. It's not much. And unfortunately, the good ones are rare. Like this is rare. And we'd want 4 of these, or 3 at least. And maybe a couple of these. But it's hard to get good crime payoffs in commons and uncommons, which I guess is why we don't have them. But there is one we can play that's actually pretty good. It's Blood Hustler. The cool thing about this card is it is both a crime payoff and also a crime committer. 4 mana, target opponent loses 1, you gain 1. That is a crime. It's very expensive, but whenever you commit a crime, you put a +1/+1 counter. So what's cool about this card is with Vial Smasher, right? Like if you could play Vial Smasher, every single outlaw you play is going to deal 1 damage and then put a counter on this. These two together are awesome, and normally it would be it'd be these two together. These two together are awesome, but since this is rare, on a budget, these two together are pretty awesome. By the way, the upgrade path for this is replacing these with Vadmir's. But for now, a 2 mana 1/1 that's going to get a counter every time once per turn, because it only triggers once per turn, but it's going to get a counter every turn when we commit a crime, is it's pretty good, and it's a little bit better than this. This does trigger crimes more consistently, or at least easier with 1 mana, but I just don't think it's very good. And again, like we've added way better ways to commit crime. So we'll get these 3 out, we'll add these 3 in, and that is looking so much better. Next, Outlaw's Fury. Now it does technically have Outlaw in the name, but all this does is it pumps over our creatures, and it does give us an extra card. We get the top card of our library if we control an outlaw. It's okay, but I love this card. 3 mana. This also gets us 2 cards, kind of. It's a card, and it makes a 1/1. Not quite the same as drawing. But what's cool about this is it makes a mercenary, so that's going to trigger, commit a crime. It's going to add a counter if we have these together. It's pretty cool. But then every single time an outlaw dies, each opponent loses 1, we gain 1, which is cool because this deck is going to have some sort of sacrifice themes kind of with the mercenaries. Unfortunately, that isn't targeted. It's each opponent, so it won't commit a crime itself. But I still think it's pretty good. And this one-time pump, this would be really good if we were putting out like tons and tons and tons of mercenary tokens, right? But we're not really. So I don't think this is good enough to make the cut. I think we need to take 2 of these out and add 2 more of the crews. Okay, next, Cerebral Confiscation. 3 mana, you can make the opponent discard 2, or you can make them reveal their hand, and then you get to choose 1, right? So they either discard 2 of their choice or 1 of yours. It's 3 mana. It's kind of clunky. It's not guaranteed the opponent has stuff in their hand by the time you draw 1 of your 2 copies, but there's a very cool card. Man, this card is cool. And better than this thing. So, this is also 3 mana. It's a warlock, so it is an outlaw. Has menace, 2/2 menace. When it enters, you choose target opponent. That's a crime. If they lost life, they reveal their hand, and you get to pick 1, and they discard it. But if they haven't lost life, they still discard a card. So what you're doing here is this can make them discard 2, but it's a spell. This only makes them discard 1, but it's a creature. So you're basically trading 1 of their cards for a 2/2, and you still have the option to choose the card. And since it's a warlock, it's going to trigger this. It's going to drain when it dies. Now, all of our outlaw stuff, this works with it. So I think this is just a fine trade. A very cool thing about Bloomburrow is a lot of these upgrade guides that I've been doing haven't been improved that much by Bloomburrow, but this is one of the ones that actually has a lot of outlaws in it because of the warlocks, and this is one of the cards that's absolutely worth playing. Next, this card. It's pretty bad. 4 mana, 3/3 menace. You can sacrifice another creature to put a counter on it, and if you sacrifice an outlaw, you get a treasure, but I don't like it that much. What I do like in this deck, though, is Corrupted Conscience, which technically isn't an outlaw, and it also doesn't technically commit a crime, but it does draw 2 cards, so we'll get more outlaws. You can sacrifice a creature to draw 2, and that's very useful because not only do we have a lot of throwaway mercenaries, but we also have stuff like this that we're happy to sacrifice, and it triggers stuff like this, right? Gonna drain 1, which is cool. So this is fine, but I don't like it as much as a very powerful Rakdos sacrifice card that's going to work well with all of our tokens and our just all of our outlaw stuff. Alright, so time to improve the removal. Let's take out 2 trick shots and 1 scorching shot, and we're just going to plain and simple here. We're just going to add Go for the Throat. I mean, pretty simple here. So, these removal spells. We have 2 mana to deal 5 damage to target creature, or for the same 2 mana, we can just kill basically everything. Technically can't kill artifacts, but like basically everything. This, on the other hand, 5 mana, 5, deals 6 damage to a creature, does deal 2 damage to a token, so you could 2 for 1 if you're willing to pay 5 for it. Alternatively, we can pay 2 and just kill everything. This is like standard still, even after rotation, standard's premier removal spell. It's just better. These things are so clunky. Let's just get them out. Note, by the way, that we also have Shoot the Sheriff in here, which is also a pretty solid removal spell. There are a lot of outlaws, can't kill warlocks and stuff, but it's still pretty good. Next, we have this final Plundering Pirate. We just aren't really ramping into much, so I think it's worth taking out for just a beater. This is not bad, 5 mana, 5/4 trample, but it has affinity for outlaws, meaning a lot of times it's like a 2 mana or 3 mana 5/4 trampler. I find this is actually totally reasonable. When I first started editing this deck, when I started working with it, I was like, oh man, this card's getting cut. There's no way we're playing this thing. And then for a little while, I debated going up to the full 4 copies. It's actually pretty good, so I absolutely think it's worth taking out one of these for one of these, and you could probably add extra. I almost did. Now, normally you would be done here, but I do think there's a few lands worth adding. Those being Jagged Barrens, 2 of these, and Demolition Field. So you could technically add the field to any deck, but I think it's particularly relevant in this one because why we want to play these is they commit crimes. This enters, deals 1 damage to an opponent, targeted opponent, meaning it commits a crime. This, you can sacrifice it, destroy target non-basic land. You could play this in literally every single starter deck because it kills the creature lands, right? If I go to lands and I type in creature, that'll probably be good enough. Maybe. Is that good enough? We're talking about these lands, right? These ones that animate into lands. These are very nice to just kill, and you can kill them with Demolition Field. So it sort of works as a pseudo removal spell, and that is going to count as a crime. We still don't have tons of crime payoffs, but we have more than before because we added this. So basically, if you crack a Demolition Field, kill a creature land, you're going to get counters on all your Blood Hustlers. So I think it's worth taking out 2 swamps, 2 mountains, and just get 4 of these because we just get some extra targeted stuff. Even though these enter tapped, I think it's worth it for the crime payoff with Blood Hustler. Now, for the rares, we have Vadmir, we have Tiny Bones, we have Laughing Jasper Flint, we have Hellspur Boss. All of these are played in tier 1 decks, and you have 1 copy of each already. There's also not in the deck Generous Plunder. I gotta turn lands off. I gotta go. Like, oh, I don't have any? Oh, I just don't have any. Okay, I don't even have this card. But I need one of those, and Gisa, not common. I don't have one of those either. Wow. Okay, well, whatever. So, the big ones, Vadmir, Tiny Bones, and Jasper Flint. These are played in basically every Outlaw deck you see. 1 mana, 1/1 Death Touch, awesome. When it deals damage, you get to cast something. Most decks will play at least a couple of these, if not 3. Vadmir is awesome. Gets a counter every time you commit a crime. If it has 4 or more counters, it gains Menace and Lifelink. Jasper's awesome. 3 mana, 4/3. And much like Tiny Bones, it can cast stuff off the opponent's library, and it turns them into mercenaries. So they will count for all your outlaw stuff. All of these are great. These other 3 are played, but they're just not as common. Hellspur Boss, 4 mana, 2/4, mix a couple 1/1s. Also gives your outlaws haste. Really nice with a Vile Smasher. This card is played in like specific decks that are built to take advantage of it. It's a 2 mana, 2/2. It's a rogue, so it's an outlaw. Menace. At the beginning of upkeep, you can create a treasure token. When you do, target opponent also gets a treasure, so you both get treasure. But then when it attacks, it deals damage to defending player equal to the number of artifacts. So you're actually trying to intentionally give them treasures that deal damage to them. You really need to build your deck to take advantage of this, though. I wouldn't just add it in willy-nilly. This, on the other hand, whenever you commit a crime, it makes a 2/2, and it's a 5 mana 4/4 that gives your other skeletons and zombies +1/+1, so it kind of makes 3 3s. And it makes 2 2/2s, by the way, not just 1. So it won't pump anything else. Just the idea here is it's a 5 mana 4/4 that's going to put out 2 3 3s when you commit crimes. What I would be taking out for any of these rares would be things like Gumdrop Poisoner, which we added, but it's not necessary. Kaervek is kind of on the fence. It's usually played in more controlling builds. Magda's also kind of weird because It's a crime payoff, but it's not an outlaw. It's a dwarf berserker, which is an outlaw. So it's not played in every deck. You could also be replacing, again, Vadmir's for the Blood Hustler. That's a pretty easy upgrade. Vadmir and the Blood Hustler is fine. Also, you could potentially cut the Corrupted Convictions for things like Tiny Bones because, this gives you extra cards. Same thing with Laughing Jasper Flint. Even though this is a 1-drop and you'd be trading it for a 3-drop, you can't play Corrupted Conviction on turn 1, right? You play on turn 4 or 5 usually. So Jasper Flint is fine. Also, murders. These are pretty bad and they're still in the deck. Let me fix this. So murder, not typically played. You could replace these with 2 of these, I think. Go for the throat and shoot the sheriff. Better than murder. Another thing I considered, I almost took them out for at knife point, which I think is pretty okay. So at knife point is another crime payoff. Whenever you commit a crime, you make a 1/1. That's it. Just commit a crime, make a 1/1. Also gives your outlaws first strike, makes it easier to attack. I didn't know if it was worth taking out a removal spell for, but murder is obviously a pretty weak removal spell. You could definitely cut these out for cut down as well. It's just faster. Only kills small things, but you already have removal for big stuff. So just having a 1-drop removal spell for aggro is nice, but those are things to consider as well. But this deck is actually pretty solid now, I think. We're definitely much better than where we started. We had so much weak stuff, and I think we're much powerful now with these upgrades, so hopefully that's useful. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.